Hey folks, it's Bill Swift from Swift Canoe and Kayak, and we're here in our showroom in Gravenhurst, Ontario. And today we're going to do something wonderful. We have my good friend and our designer, David Yost, here. Scott, our social media guru, did a posting asking customers to send in questions for DY, and we all know DY loves to talk. So DY, we're going to have some fun here. I've got some great questions, so welcome and thank you for coming.
Well, I enjoyed being here.
All right. We've had a factory tour yesterday, and it's even snowed for us some here, so we're getting a taste of winter already. So David, the first question I have, Amy Outdoors, who's actually a gal from Australia that got a cruiser 16.8 last year, she wants to know, would it be possible to create a 16.8 cruiser with the same hull, only a tiny bit of tumble home, and no S-gunnel without affecting the performance of the boat?
It's possible, but it's a lot of tooling costs. I would probably recommend you get a Keewaydin 16 rigged as a solo boat.
Yeah, that's what I messaged her back and said that. The Keewaydin 16 Combi, Amy, with a seat right in the middle, it's going to perform in the water really nice for somebody your size. I think you should give it a shot, and I'm sure the good folks down at Paddle Portage would have one that you could paddle. So another question, this is from Simon Race, who I believe is from the UK. Does the fact that there's such tradition and history attached to canoe design, allied to such reverence for the Chestnut designs, mean that you must factor our expectations of what a canoe should look like when you sit and designs?
Okay, there is a market for the traditional look or retro look. The designs, have changed a lot because we use the boats differently. A boat you're hauling fur in or mining equipment is different than a boat you're paddling recreationally or lightweight camping gear. So the look has a big part of our image, but the hull designs are been refined quite a bit because the usage has changed.
And the older boats, the Peterboroughs, the Chestnuts, there's so many of them out there, and there's so many people that swear by them, and they love that look, and so many people really want to come in and get a boat that has that style.
Yeah, but we also got to remember they built a lot of good boats. They were boats built for people who use boats constantly, use them for work. And so you had a generation where they spent a lot of time in the boats and got very critical about it. The only thing we have to look at boats where the usage has changed and refine them to modern usage. But there's a lot to be learned from old boats.
Now, David, I know you and I have talked about this for so much over all the years. You have the books on the old Peterboroughs and the old Chestnuts. And you showed me the Peterborough book and the Chestnut book. I can't believe how many different models they had. Like, people think of them as a 16-foot Prospector, but those companies made 15, 20 different models.
Yes, because there's a lot of different usages. The boats you're selling in the New Brunswick, for fishing on the rivers are different for boats you sell in the Algonquin Park where you're carrying it all the time. So the environment which the boat was being used in, changed the size of the boats and the usage of the boats. And you got to remember, a lot of those boats were work boats. And people were making their living with them. And
putting lots of weight in them.
A lot of weight. The Prospectors, had a lot of rocker because you're putting a ton of mining machinery in the middle of the boat. You still had to be able to turn it. We don't carry that kind of weight in a boat anymore. At least hopefully if I have to portage it.
So then quickly getting into, for example, our Prospector 16, I know you told me your favorite Chestnut boat is?
The Cruiser 17. I think it's the best boat they did. No, less rocker, more track better, still maneuverable. I just like their cruiser series.
Yep, I agreed. Here, here. So, Simon, I think one of the answers is it's definitely a factor now when we talk about boats, the look of them. And at Swift, the aesthetics of the boat, to me, is so important. I grew up paddling Chestnut cedar canvas boats with the beautiful wood interiors. So I think from David at the design standpoint, and then for Swift, once we start putting the boats all together, we definitely take the look and the aesthetics into account when we're putting the boat together. So let's move on, and here's a question from someone you know, Kim Gass.
Yes.
What do you foresee the next generation of canoe design to be?
That's hard because unless we come up with a new usage, I think we beat every bush to death. What's going to change, I think, is going to be materials, because the material affects how you do the boat. If you're taking a boat for one usage, by doing it as a Royal X boat, it's a different shape than a composite boat, a different shape than a wooden canvas boat, or in strip construction, use an entirely different shape. So materials affect shape, and then usage. We're taking boats that used to for freight haulers, now use them for recreational boats. And so unless there's a new use that pops up I haven't foreseen, I think materials is going to be the thing that's driving boat design.
You know what a good example of this is somewhat, is that the pack boats, which we'll talk about later, been around for generations now, but recently they've become extremely popular in composite boat construction.
Yeah, it's a popular boat, but the problem is we got a false history. We look at the Wee Lassie and the Sari Gamp and think that was the Adirondack pack canoe. They were not. People go to the Blue Mountain Lake Museum and they stand in front of the exhibit with the 3 little Rushton boats, get Lassie-litis, drool all over themselves. They really needed to move 20 feet to the right, and there's a mannequin standing there with a boat that's about 13 by 32 inches wide. That was Dr. Gerstner's boat. And he went out on a month-long trip every summer, carrying all of his gear. That was a traveling boat. George Washington Sears weighed 90 pounds, had TB. This is the only size boat he could carry, and he didn't carry any gear. He stopped at the hotels or the guides' camps and he wasn't carrying gear. And he went across Saranac Lake on the deck of a steamship. No, it was not a versatile boat that we were made to believe it was.
The small Wee Lassie
Yeah.
shape. Yeah.
No, you even go back to the little birch barks Indians made. Boats are 2 people long, knee spread wide. 12 by 28 to 32. And if you had 2 tall guys getting the bark off the tree, they'd be 13 feet long. You didn't really start making bigger boats until you got steel tools. And when we built my birch bark, we used a gasoline-powered Tommy Hawk, cut the tree down, and took the bark off on the ground. But most of those little Indian boats were small.
Yeah, and so in answer to Kim's question, I agree with you that we're going to need a new use.
Yeah.
To come up with something really uniquely different than what we currently have.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on. Here is, and Bob, I've modified this question. So this is Bob Bennett. Which boat did you learn the most from? Maybe went through the most iterations or prototypes of? What is a boat that you really took a while to really nail?
Going through 2 boats is pretty normal. First I build what Bill says he wants, then I build him what he really wants. The Keewaydin 17 went through 3 versions.
Yeah, why don't we just show folks that this is the cross-section shapes of the Keewaydin 17, which even shows the rocker down at the bottom here in the front. So we're going to do another video to talk about this in detail to show you how DY specifically lofts the boats, and then we build a prototype shape of it. So we've learned a lot, I know, doing the cruiser series. We tried different shapes and so on. And then DY is right about something. Sometimes we go to DY and we don't quite know what we want. We haven't fine-tuned it in our minds until we get a prototype and we try it. And then we realize, hey, maybe we wanted something a little different. Maybe we wanted more stability. Maybe we wanted more maneuverability. And we discuss it, and then we often will do a second version.
Well, I think the big advantage of building a paddleable prototype is you get to try it. I know a company that, they designed a kayak on a computer, put it in production. It was about $250,000. They get the metal molds, got it, the first boat out of it, took to a sea kayak symposium, and nobody could get their feet under the deck. Eliminates problems. You know how it paddles. Even if I was going to do a plug on a CNC machine, I'd still build a strip boat, paddle it, and then you could digitize that and have one carved. But being able to paddle it and making sure before you inflict it on the public, I think is an important advantage of how we go about it.
Now, do you find, DY, you've been doing this for, we won't say how many years, but you've learned so much over the years. Do you think now when you build a prototype, are you getting better at sort of nailing what the potential usage is? Like when you did it before, do you think you did more prototypes, or has that not really changed much?
I think the standards have been raised. You've gotten more, you're fussier about what you want, you're more aware of what your customer wants, So we refined, you're demanding more and I have to give more. And it's been interesting.
We'll tell a good Harry Roberts story about that later for a boat that maybe jumped the gun. Okay, here's another good question. Anad has asked, I would be fascinated to know how DY got into canoe design.
The short answer is I wanted a racing canoe, and my wife wouldn't let me buy it, so I went up in the attic and built one, screwed up the first one, built a second, and then I got curious because I didn't do better in third place the whole season. So at the end of the season, I took the boat and started modifying it and experimenting and reading everything I could, and went up to the attic, built another one, and eventually I got a building down the street to work in, so we kept the dust out of the house. But basically, I wanted a boat, and
it was a race boat that first got you interested.
Yeah, the marathon class, solo class had just started. Bob Demmer had been building an appropriate boat for a number of years before there was a class. The first boat built specifically for the class was Eugene Jensen's little 14-footer, which I was probably too big for. I ended up building a boat that was 16.4 and built like a Sherman tank, paddled it for a year. But it started the process of how can I get better? New York State had tough competitors. I was never going to be as strong as Mark Gillespie or Will Hackett, but I could try to get a better boat, better handling boat. I found I personally did better in races. My boat handled better. If you get one more, you're not fighting the rough water. Instead of gritting your teeth, you're paddling. And so comfort in the boat and different water conditions became important. But it was a long process.
Now, folks, you have to hear this. DY, tell them how you got the boats out of the attic.
Well, I squeezed them together, put my belt around it, cinched it up, stuck it out of the windmill, and lowered it down with a rope, and then I sanded the inside and did the inside on the front porch.
Oh, I love that one. Okay. How do you get inspiration for your new designs?
Well, the thing is that a new design doesn't start with me. Somebody will say, David, I need a boat that does such and such. I'm going on a moose hunting trip. I need a solo canoe. I'm going I want to do this, I want to do that, you know. So somebody else gives me a criteria. We want the boat to do this, this, and this, and this. Then I go then I design and build a boat. Then when it's done, did it do what they wanted to or it didn't? So I'm always judging my boats by somebody else's criteria. And so, Mike Galt, he made those little half models. He put his soul into it. If he said something about his boat, it ripped his heart out. I was always a little more detached from it. Okay, Bill, did it do what you wanted? Okay, let's go on. What's next? So I'm always, there's another person behind every boat I've ever done. Might be a couple exceptions, but.
One of the things, DY, that I've always enjoyed over the years that we've done is that we do a lot of on-water events together, and we'll be at an event and we'll get some customers come in that are looking for a boat that's different than what we currently have available. And we always take them over to the competitor and say, this is a boat you should get for yourself. But it often will steer our creative juices flowing and get us talking about what type of boat we could do for that particular customer.
Yeah, it's, feedback from users is important. Keeps us in the real world. We never met a new boat we didn't want. So trying to get down a boat that meets the needs of a large number of people gets a little harder. And periodically, see, I want such and such, and I say, if you really want, we're only going to build one, I'll make you a wood stripper. The expense of putting it into production for you to get one boat is ridiculous.
Now, I know a boat we call Gord Baker's boat from Algonquin Outfitters, the Algonquin 16. We sat down with Gord many years ago, and we created a boat that virtually anybody could paddle, but it has really good performance.
Yeah. Well, he knew what he wanted. You've been worked at that outfitter for years. He's probably dealt with 10,000 customers a year. He knew what was needed and what he wanted. It was like the three-man boat I did for you. I wouldn't have done it if I didn't think your brother really knew what he wanted. But the better the criteria as you sit down when you start, you can meet it. But if you have kind of a loosey-goosey criteria, the boat's not as good. So the more critical the person you're building the boat is for, and the better feedback they give you, the better the boats tend to be.
And we've been a little bit too loosey-goosey sometimes with David. It made his job a little bit harder. But we've ended up going for 2 or 3 prototypes in some boats, like the Keewaydin 17. This boat is a really good example.
Yeah.
Terry Kent originally wanted a really fast cruising, tripping 17-footer. DY built us a prototype, and we ended up pushing it and pulling it out in different places, and DY saw it and was like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. If you wanted a tumble home boat, he's telling me I want a boat that comes out of a one-piece mold. So first thing to do when they get it is pull it in and give it tumble home and push it out and tell me what you want. Tell me what you want up front. Because the boat pad, was pretty squirrely when you were done with it.
And then when you went back and redesigned it with tumble home, it is now absolutely my favorite tripping canoe. It's the boat I use on all my trips.
Yeah.
We really nailed it, but it took a while to get there.
Yeah.
It took a while. It took longer for us to realize what we wanted than for David to design the boat. And it was going through that prototype and then paddling it and playing around with it that made us realize what we wanted.
Like I said, you build what you ask for, and you build what you really want. It's almost always 2 boats.
Okay, here's a good one from Troy Payne. How did you meet Bill Swift, and what did you think of him when you first met him?
No, he was a nice kid. I met at races. It got to a point where his older sister dropped him and Terry Kent off at my house to go paddling. I lived right on the river in Rochester. I had my boat shop there. I always thought it was interesting as kids, Bill wanted to own a canoe company, and Terry Kent wanted to go to the Olympics. And they both met their goals.
Yeah.
Now, at the time, Bill's idea was you only need 3 boats. 1-man boat, 2-man boat, 3-man boat. Then in college, he wrote a paper that there are 5 canoes market. You know, cottage canoe, light tripper, cruiser, I forgot the 5th one. And now look at how many boats he has.
Well, we have iterations and variations for different size paddlers in each category now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do remember when I first met DY, he would show up at the marathon canoe races with a beautiful cedar strip boat. And I grew up paddling in wood boats, so I'd want to go meet this guy. And he had a really cool old orange pickup truck. And then we just developed a friendship from there and ended up finding out where he lived. And I remember going over and helping you strip a boat when I was young. And I told you I wanted to build boats.
Yeah.
And it sort of evolved from there.
Yeah, it did.
Okay, how about, you must have a lot of history with the Swift family.
Well, I've known Bill since he was in junior high school. So I've kind of watched him grow up. I kind of fell into a role of a Dutch uncle. You know, he asked me for advice over the years, and long time. I knew Bill before I knew his parents.
And then Algonquin Outfitters has been a big part of our growth. It was a real good fit for all of us. One of the things, folks, that I think has really helped Swift become successful is the Algonquin Outfitters rental operation. Getting so much feedback from customers that are renting boats that could potentially be buyers, both from a design perspective and also a construction perspective. How light a boat would they want? What features in a boat are really important? And I think with David's designs and what we've created, we've got a real good marriage where we've created these absolutely wonderful boats. So DY, here's a good question from Brandon McKee. Do you have any designs you're working on at the moment?
Always. I'd like to do a deck sailing canoe. I'd like to do another big man solo canoe. I don't think we have good choices for our larger consumer. And there's some weird stuff that I think it might be fun to build, but no one else would be interested.
So this is actually a prototype for a 15-foot solo Prospector-shaped boat that DY has designed to what we asked for. And this is typical of us going through the process where we've realized that we may want something a little bit different with this boat. So now we are pondering over redoing it, changing the specs on it a little bit. And I love being able to try the prototypes out, having different people try them. And David, something that both you and John Winters always told me is that you often learn more watching other people paddle the prototypes than you do yourself. Mm-hmm. And why do you think that is?
Well, first I think we get our ego involved, and so we think the boat's perfect. The other is most of us paddle well enough that we can be more forgiving of the boat. And so you get people who are less skilled. You get better feedback. If they're having trouble in wind with the boat, okay. No, you and me out in the wind would know how to deal with it. A different paddler. Mark Rickert's always my best feedback. Short guy, not the best paddler in the world, but he could communicate how the boat felt to him, and it was probably the best feedback I could get. Racers tend to be the worst. All they can tell you after they paddle the boat is what place they were in the race. If they're first, it's a great boat. If they were third, it's a crappy boat. But if you get a wider range of people paddling the boat, you get better feedback.
Right, and that's the case that we're doing for this one. We want to create a boat that a real big paddler that maybe want to take along a couple of one dog, two dogs, and a bunch of gear is going to feel real comfortable. And so we will probably have a new prototype in the spring for people to try out at our Oxtung store. So here's a real good question, DY. What led you to determine the chine shape and hull shape of the DY Special? Because that was a real trend-setting boat at its time. You really went out there when you did that.
Well, we have to talk about a boat before that. I built a boat I called the folding boat. And basically, the boat was built with a fair amount of rocker in it. And I took the middle strip out, wrapped it in saran wrap, stuck it back in, and glassed the boat. Then I peeled it out, and I covered that space with nylon tape and a flexible epoxy, then did the rest of the boat. So the boat would hinge like this. And the idea is, okay, sit upside down the sawhorse, that's 27 inches wide. You put it in the water, and it goes like that. It's 17 inches wide on the water line, and the keel came straight.
So it met the race specs on the sawhorse. Then when you got it in the water, it became a skinny, faster boat.
No, started with a question about it. Someone had a boat that they had a long pedestal seat, and when he sat on it, pushed it down, it made it narrower. And when he and had a question about that, I built that boat, but I never raced it. I thought it wouldn't be sporting. But at some point, I pulled it in a little bit, so I had some V, took the lines off it, widened them, and I made a boat for Armin Bassett. And
that had quite the DY had quite a V to the bottom.
Yeah, had the V. Well,
and then the chines.
Yeah, the chines. But what happened there is I got it around my lips, went like this, and put a piece like that in. So the top of the gunnels ended up like this. And for a training boat, it didn't matter.
And normally they should be straight up.
Yeah,
this
you want
is
to end
to
on a vertical.
Assemble it.
So when Sawyer made a mold off it before talking to me, they put those aluminum gunnels on it, twisted the boat up, so I always called it camel humped. I've drawn up a few since then for people, for home builds, where I made it so you can put the gunnel on it, but they already had their mold made.
So why don't we tell the folks about that real quick, that Harry Roberts came and picked the boat up. He saw the plug at Armin's and took it without telling
No,
you.
he got it from Dave Curtis. When Wilderness Camping Magazine got sold, Harry Roberts is out of work. And Dave Curtis got him a job as the marketing manager at Sawyer. So on his way from Rotterdam Junction to Lascota, he stopped to thank Dave Curtis, saw the boat in the barn there, put it on his car, and took it with him. And then at some point, I didn't even know he had it. I get a phone call, hey, we'd like to put this boat in production. And I say, well, you better let me build you another plug if you're going to put aluminum gunnels on it. This is too late. We already made the mold.
Things like that happened in the old days in the canoe industry. That was probably in the 80s. That was a while ago. The years may blend together now.
Yeah, it's been the 80s.
So in terms of the DY shape, like it had that V on the bottom, and then that shape evolved. Then you did the Shockwave, where you changed the shape more considerably. And why did you change the shape for the Shockwave?
To get more volume into it. Get a boat that would run better in shallow water. Trying to keep up with the current trend. It was never really intended to be a full-blown race boat. We were kind of shooting for the triathlon market, and you still wanted a boat to run in waves because most of the triathlons were run on lakes. Now,
both of those boats, the DY Special and the Sawyer Shockwave, they were really good selling boats for Sawyer.
Yeah, they were. I think the DY sold better than it should have because Harry wrote good ads. I probably got his Huckleberry Finn ad in the file over there.
For the Huckleberry Finn and all of us, the DY Special.
Yeah, he did some neat ads.
Yeah.
But there wasn't really many recreational souls around that point. You just go to 13. They sold a ton of them. That would be kind of be in the market where your Prospector 14 is.
Okay. This is also from George. Have your views on the chine shape changed over the years? And let's tell the folks what a chine is.
Well, technically it's a sharp break in the shape of the boat. To me, it's the area coming from the bottom up to above the water line. So you can have a square cross section or a more rounded cross section. And I think the chine shapes affect the handling of the boat more than anything else. If you take the middle third of the boat was flat V'd, hogged, it doesn't make as much difference as going up the sides. Now that is what gives you the feel for the boat, and you need to carry it up high enough. Think of a rocking chair. You can sit on a rocking chair and rock back and forth and you're comfortable. If this joker came over and cut the rockers over right behind your legs, you'd rock back and you'd flip. You'd be on the floor. That shape needs to carry above the water on a smooth transition. And you should be able to sit in a boat and move side to side, and the boat should give you feedback. A canoe or kayak is the only boat where the center of gravity is higher than the center of buoyancy. And so all the rules in naval architecture of stability don't apply. It comes down to the feedback, the shape of the boat's given your body for you to, I better straighten up. And that's why this chine shapes has been real important to me.
Now, I know something you and I have talked over a lot over the years is that there are boats in the market that's chine shape, maybe one shape in the ends, and then it goes to the middle, it's another shape, and then it goes back and it's another shape. And that with your designs, there's more consistency from one end to the other in the shape. And it helps contribute to the overall feel of stability in the boat.
Yeah. Well, an abrupt change in shape will give you an abrupt change in behavior of the boat. And so we're trying to build boats that behave for us. Are our friends. We don't want to be your buddy that smacks you in the back of the head in the locker room. We got you. So I'm always looking for a boat that gives me feedback so I know what this boat's doing. You should be able to close your eye and sit in the boat. You know what it's doing. We had someone just yesterday talk about falling asleep in their boat.
Yep.
Waiting for their friends to catch up to them.
Cindy Bartley's friend, Lori, who we did a video with recently in Pac-12 Sixes, told us that one day it was nice and sunny out and she's sitting in her boat and she fell asleep, just sitting in her boat without a feeling of she's going to fall out of it. Russell Kovic, is there a canoe design concept that you've not done yet that you've wanted to tackle? And you talk about the sailing canoe, I think is the big one that you've hit me with a few times. Why a sailing canoe?
Well, a friend of mine for most of my paddling life, Mark Rickard, collected old canoeing books. And he had all the old books from the 1880s, 1890s on canoeing printed by Forest and Stream. And he had the original McGregor books, and I inherited that bookshelf. And so I was always kind of interested in the traveling rubber of that period of time. So this always intrigued me. And then they involved the sailing boats. Then Hugh Horton was building deck sailing canoes using Starfire hulls. And so Mark and I built a couple Starfires and got his deck mold. And at that point, Mark started having joint replacements and I started having heart attacks. So we never went on the trip. Had the sails in the basement and the carbon mask.
Have you done some canoe sailing?
Not since I was a kid.
It is neat. At camp, we used to raft all the canoes together on days we had big tailwinds and put up big tarps. And I wouldn't call it canoe sailing in an individual boat, but when you can use the wind and move the boats like that, it's a pretty cool feeling.
I think the last time I canoe sailed, I was on Kinesis Lake with my brother. We had a 17-foot Grumman with a sail rig. And my brother ran the controls. My job was to lean in and out to keep the boat level. The wind was gusty. And lean back at some point and ended up in the water. It took my brother forever to get turned around to come get me.
Okay. What trends do you foresee appearing in the future of canoe design? We've touched on it a little bit.
Well, the mass market is going to it's going to follow cheaper materials and more stable boats then there will always be a specialty market for the radical specialized boats, but that's part of the market. It's going to stay fairly small. You know.
So the materials you feel will dictate part of it?
Yeah. When they started doing roller molding, it changed kayaks. It made them cheap and accessible. And they were small because the material was heavy, you know.
Ken Sikorsky is asking, what is the biggest obstacle you face when designing a new boat?
Getting Bill to make up his mind.
I think that is right, narrowing in on what we really want.
Once you know what you want the boat to do, then it's just kind of putting the pieces together. And I can go over to my cabinets, and I did 200 boats, okay. Okay, this boat behaved this way. I can pull out the sections, okay. And okay, I can pull out another boat, and how was the front? And they typically look like the second or third station in the boats, and you can kind of know what you want to do I have a library of old boats to go back to, and so they tend to evolve. Like the Keewaydin went through 3 generations. You had the first Keewaydin I did which kind of evolved out of the Sawyer 222, was evolved out of a boat I did for Canoe Specialists back in the
70s,
late 70s.
maybe?
Yeah.
70s, 80s?
Yeah. I built a couple boats for them.
DY, here's a good question, not from me, not a consumer. How many boats do you think you've actually drawn out and build prototypes for?
200.
And how many production boats do you think you've had over the years?
I think around 70. Charlie Wilson says 87, but I think he counts a couple boats twice when they first made by this company and made by another company.
Yeah, and I wonder how long ago Charlie told you that, because...
Yeah, but it's a lot.
Okay. Martin Cartwright, another fellow from the UK. We see a lot of commentary about external hull shapes, the shape of the boat, but I'd like to know how you decide the seat positions, in particular the seat height.
Well, seat position is pretty easy. You go paddle the boat until it's trimmed right, it's paddling right. You take the magic marker, make a mark on the floor, and hope Bill puts a seat there when he makes it. The seat height depends a lot on, how you're going to paddle the boat. You put the seat way up here, then the person sits on it, puts his knees on it, and it's going to fall out. If you're going to, a sitting seat should be that high. Oh, that one's a little higher. A kneeling seat is at least that, so you can get your feet under it. Pack canoe is this or less. And then you can, if you want a higher seat, you typically end up widening
The boat a bit.
boat. like when I did the boat for Texas Water Safari for Butch Bailey. No, how stable a boat you need? He said, well, I can take a Sawyer Summer Song, put a board on the gunnels and paddle it. Then I had him sit on books at night watching TV till he knew how high he wanted a seat. Then you kind of, okay, Sawyer Summer Song's this wide, he's this high, if he's going to be this high, the boat came out 22 inches wide. But it depends on but if you're going to paddle it sitting or kneeling, it affects the seat height.
And we do often, for example, like we may get someone who wants a kneeling boat that has size 12, 13, 14 feet.
You move
We
the
need
seat
to
up.
put the seat up a little bit. So we do modify some of the, based upon customer requirements.
The boat's got to fit you.
Here's a question from Scott Spencer. What is the industry standard for measuring rocker, and what is your method?
There's no industrial standard I'm aware of. No, mine is a drafting convention. You know, the first thing I draw on a boat is the rocker, and you carry it out to the furthest point. So you have lines on the paper this way. Here's the furthest point, and where the rocker line meets that is something I can measure, typically 2 inches, and I could duplicate that on a later boat. And so, okay, that group of boats is 1.5 inches. This is 2. That was 2.5. It's a drafting convention because if your point's here, then you put a stem in it. The point's off the boat. It's strictly a drafting convention I use, and I can kind of put boats in the rough groups from that.
So first, let's say 16-foot trippers. Typically, I know that it's usually 12, 14, 15 inches in from the end where you measure the rocker.
Well, the easiest way is you get your buddy at the other end of the boat, you put your finger on it, and you sight over it. You need at least 1. 2 is nice, and 3 is getting there. It's kind of like whiskey. And so just quickly looking at a boat, getting a buddy at the other end, and sighting over and see how much curve there is to it. And if you get to that, it's probably too much.
He loves that. It's part of a talk, the amount of whiskey in a glass. 1 is the boat, you're still feeling pretty good and you're moving straight. 2, DY, you're getting a little bit tipsy. 3, and you're really feeling it, it's really playful. In 4 inches of rocker and maybe...
Ooh.
Okay, here's a question from Bill Swift. DY, my favorite boats you have designed are the Cruiser 16.8, Keewaydin 17, and Loon Works Aria, the 14-footer, the Tom McKenzie boat. What is your favorite boat that you have designed?
That's hard because I started off as a whitewater paddler, became a marathon paddler, became a canoe tripper, dabbled in freestyle. Now, in my old age, I'm just running laps around my lake. So it's harder to say because I've changed the way I've used them so many times. My next boat's going to be a Cruiser 13.8. That's probably the best boat for paddling on my lake. When I was young, I paddled a Han whitewater boat, and
Then marathon racing canoes?
Tripping. Canoe tripping is what got me thinking about boat designs more. You had to be able to handle well, perform well in a lot of different conditions. Then you kind of go through phases. I went through my pack canoe stage where I did a couple of years. I did all my trips out of a little 12-foot pack canoe. And
Well, for me, that Keewaydin 17 for tripping with 2 people, it's unbelievable, the waves, the conditions we paddle it through, and how it's so controllable and it's so efficient in the water, even when it gets really rough. That to me is just such a home run.
I think the boat I paddled the most tripping would have been the 34-inch wide Algonquian 16. The one that was between the Sawyer 190 and your 17?
Yeah.
No, I paddled that a lot. It would carry my wife, a kid, and myself. I had a Sawyer 222 with 4 seats in it. And I did a portage up in the Adirondack, so I'm never going to carry that boat again. So I went to a smaller boat and a pack canoe or a kayak, and the wife and kids could take turns getting away from Captain Bly.
What is your favorite Loon Works boat? It's the Loon Works boats, folks, that don't know. Tom McKenzie, who was building birch bark boats, started building beautiful cedar canvas David Yost designs and did a number of them. And there's some of them that they're absolutely beautiful, but it's really neat paddling a David Yost design in cedar canvas.
The Mistral?
That's the 15-footer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful boat. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Alphonse. I love both DY and John Winter design boats. Can you explain the design philosophies between the two of you? That was a good expression, DY.
Well, first I have to say, John and I approach it very differently. He probably knows the science of small boat design better than anybody in the world. And the only good literature on design of small boats would be The Shape of the Canoe by John Winters, which used to be a book you can get off your computer. Now, he had the science down. I always treat it more like an art. And it was kind of interesting, Bill giving us each the same criteria, we'd come up with very different boats. And I know someone once told me, someone was asked a question, what was the difference between those two guys? And he said, well, John Winters would sit down and design the mathematically perfect water line. Then he'd tell the bow paddler to move their knees together. Now, I would sit down, how much room does the bow paddler need? Then put the best water line around it I could. So I think I paid a little more attention to the feel. In him,
To bow paddler comfort,
bow
especially
paddler
when kneeling.
comfort particularly. But for the science of small boat design, nobody knew it better than he did.
Yes, and both DY and John Winters design incredible boats.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun when you guys were both doing it together.
Yeah,
I remember showing up an event in Indianapolis when you had each done 15-foot boats. This was a great story. And late at night, we ended up putting both of them into the indoor swimming pool, these 2 freestyle boats for people to try.
Kind of upset the hotel a little bit.
Okay, here's one. So this is from @Liz Oregon. What is your dream paddle trip?
Northern Forest Canoe Trail. You know, I planned to do it with my son when he got out of the Army. 9/11 it happens, his tour got extended. By the time he came out the second time, he was married, and that ended that. Then Mark Ricker and I were going to do it in deck sailing canoes. We were building the boats for it. Then I started having heart attacks, and he started having joint replacements. That kind of killed that.
So the Northern Forest Canoe Trail is a trip starting in Old Forge in the Adirondacks, going all through the Adirondacks, across northern Vermont. It even goes into Quebec some and New Hampshire, through Lake Country in Maine, and then down. Is it the Allagash River?
No, you're going down the Allagash, then you hit whatever the bigger river is, and you end up at Fort Kent.
Yeah, it's an incredible trip, and many people do it over a variety, like take 3 or 4 summers to do the whole thing, and there are a few people that have done the whole trip in one summer. Yeah. Okay, let's @Multicam Camper. What is your favorite canoe color scheme?
Tucson cream over shellac bottom on a wooden canvas canoe.
Beautiful. Did Tom McKenzie do a few like that?
He did one. We call it the root beer float. No, neighbor, a friend of mine has it now. I got a little bit fat for it. And now that I've lost a lot of weight, I'm trying to get him to sell it back to me, but he won't.
Those cedar canvas boats with the two-tone bottom, Tom's, and then Jerry Stelmach had built just some beautiful boats like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that slack bottom is kind of an interesting thing. You get in Maine, you see Grumman canoes with shellac bottoms,
Yeah.
which surprised me.
Blairski 007 wants to know, what is your favorite two-person canoe tripping canoe and why?
What's out there now? I'd probably take the Prospector 16. No, it's a boat that could go from lake country to whitewater. That's the boat I took on a 10-day trip in Alaska and worked out real well. Paddled with my wife. We had 10 days of gear. No. I was going to, one rapid I didn't run. It was, river scales between two stone walls and goes through a couple big drops, and we're lining the boats through. And the guy got impatient, so him and his wife ran my boat through. They've been trying to get in that boat the whole trip. And we had one rapid there where it scared the daylights out of my wife. One big, long, borderline class 2-3 rapid.
A 10-day canoe trip in Alaska and a Prospector 16. I'll take that any day.
That was a neat trip. And the two best trips I probably ever did, 3 good trips. And what made a lot of it was the group of people. We did the group, the Allagash, I think there was 12 of us, and there were a lot of them were the kids that were in that scout group I worked with, and Carl Flynn and his kids. And we did the Spanish River with a group of guys from Chicago. That was a fun trip. But the trip in Alaska is the only time in my life I ever felt I was in true wilderness. In 10 days, I never saw a beer can, a toilet paper flower, a sign that anyone had ever been there before me. The only sign of human life, on our last day, we came by a Native American fish camp where all the drying racks, where they go in the spring, catch the fish and dry them for the year's food. But I'm not used to that. Any campsites, I run into the Adirondacks, campsite looks well used. There was nothing. And a little thing. We make camp, this part of the world, when you're all done, even your leftover firewood, you stack it up for the next person, next to the fire ring. Up there, you make your fire on a fire pan, and then if you have any leftover wood, you walk up and down the beach and distribute it, so it doesn't look like anyone ever camped there. It was really a little different than what I was used to.
Sounds like that trip really touched you.
It did.
Well, how about DY? We go to Jim Furman. Wants to know if you have a favorite Swift solo canoe or pack boat.
At this point in my life, I'd have to say the Cruiser 13.8.
And you have a 12.6 right now.
Yeah. My trouble is I can't bend I'm waiting for a knee operation. I can't bend my knees enough to get out of it. And you don't take a nice boat like that and run it up on the rock beach to get out.
Matt Ziegler wants to know, what is your favorite river that you have paddled?
Yeah, we ran the Spanish at high water, so I was at the limit of my skill and courage. I was running it in Des Moines with Dan Decker, and on the way up there, he got a call from his doctor that his cancer had come back, and he wanted him to turn around. And he said, "I'm not doing it, because once you put me on chemo, I'm not going to get another." He went and did the canoe trip. It was a great trip, great group of guys. We never really hit still water. It was moving the whole distance. Graveyard Rapid was scary. Like probably the only time in my life I ever happily did portage a Royalex canoe. The river in Alaska was nice, but the Spanish kind of tested my skill.
Okay, here's a good question. Andrew Kokovic, excuse me if I didn't pronounce that right. What do you like to tell customers that ask about keels? This is one that always frustrated John Winters.
Keel only has about 3 functions. One's to hold 2 halves of an aluminum canoe together, keep it from tearing the bottom of a canvas canoe, and to make up for lack of paddling skills or poor design.
John used to always say that all the design characteristics of the boat, when you design it without a keel, you take into account the tracking, the maneuverability, the amount that the boat might side slip in the wind and so on. It's more a result of the overall shape of the boat rather than whether it has a keel or not.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a good one from @Roman Spiritanov. Why being able to calculate ideal contours on computer models and easily implement any of the possible shapes in composite, why do we continue to make prospectors?
There's a difference between making prospectors and making boats called prospectors. It became a kind of generic term. It covers a wide variety of boats from good to bad. But traditional boats are pretty. The shapes of, probably my shape is more influenced by the boats I did for Tom McKenzie. And we try to bring, if you compare you had an old Chestnut Prospector and our Prospector and side by side, and you see they're very, very different boats.
The Chestnut would be fuller in the ends, wider.
Actually, they're fairly fine. They're kind of cheeky.
And then the cheeks come out, yeah.
And then 4 inches of rocker. They're a kite. They were designed to put 2,000-pound compressor in the middle of it, haul it down to your mining site, and still be able to turn the boat. We don't load boats that heavy anymore.
Okay, here's a good question from the sales manager at Swift Canoe, Brandon Arnold. The most asked question we get is from a customer, how do we choose between a Prospector 16 and Keewaydin 16? What are some of the factors that consumers should consider?
How do you paddle? If you're fairly traditional using a straight paddle, you probably like a Prospector because it has enough play to it you can utilize 57 varieties of strokes. If you like a bent paddle and you rather paddle quickly, the Keewaydin 16 is a nicer traveling boat. If you're paddling on strictly lake country, I would take the Keewaydin. I would not have taken the Keewaydin on the trip in Alaska. You start running a mix of flat and river conditions, you need more rocker, more buoyancy into the end. And how are you going to use it? How are you going to paddle it? Then most important thing is go paddle it.
That's the best answer, is paddle that. But if you get someone that absolutely can't paddle it, those factors you're talking about are important. Okay, then how about, here's a good question from Kelly Cottrell. She manages our South River store. What are some factors paddlers should consider when deciding between the Adirondack 12 kayak and the Kiwassa 12.6?
When I put people in the boats to try them, I always give them the Adirondack 12 first because it's stable and they get comfortable. And then you always should try one boat higher up the skill scale than you think you want. It's better to find out the day that boat's too tippy or that one's too slow. But the thing I found most often is with small statured women in the Adirondack 12, they got to reach like this to get the boat paddle over here, and they reach over here to get the paddle on this side, and going from side to side on a fairly wide boat, they're moving constantly. That makes them feel unstable. That same person, even a beginning paddler, you put them in the Kiwassa, which is suddenly this much narrower, and they can reach the water easier. They feel more stable because they're not reaching. They keep their weight centered in the boat.
And sometimes we found too a test paddle, some people are using too short a paddle when they try certain boats, and getting a proper paddle size is important as well.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. We get many women in that even are just entering the sport that prefer the Kiwassa over the Adirondack. And you wouldn't think, they don't think that when they first come in, but once they get in it and paddle it a bit, they love it.
I've seen a lot of Adirondack 13.6s with wives with Saronacks. But if a group of people are going to paddle together, they got to have speed compatible boats. And instead, well, she's just a little lady, so I get her this little short, cheap boat, and I'm going to get myself that $5,000 sea kayak. Don't work that way. Her boat has to be as fast or faster than yours.
DY, this has been a lot of fun over the years. We've done so many different boats.
Yeah.
You love this. Like, I know you well. There's sometimes I've talked to you and we converse, and you may not be feeling great, but then as soon as we start talking about boats, there's some energy that starts flowing through your body and you just light up.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself doing this for a while still?
I'm trying to phase out of sanding plugs is a lot of hard work. And I have too much arthritis in my shoulders to do it. And I've eaten enough sawdust in my life. No. So when I decided to back off, I taught some stuff to Charlie Thompson out at Bell, so they don't need me anymore. And I've been teaching Carl, he's been working with me, and last bunch of boats, I sit there in the stool and he drafts them.
So Carl is DY's son.
Yes.
And Carl has been drawing the shapes of the new boats. He's been doing many of the cruisers. And you tell me, DY, that you think that Carl has a little bit more of even a critical eye than you do.
Well, I could never get the S-gunnels to look right. So I got Carl over to play with it, and everyone's happy with him. He's a fussy person. He nitpicks more than I do. But on the other hand, he's not starting here like I did. Okay, I'm starting at this. He's starting at a level with a lot of the pioneer work done. He can build on it, and he comes up with little twists and twinkles on how to do things.
Well, you guys are creating incredible boats. Yeah. So I'd like to thank you from my perspective of all these beautiful boats you've created. I love paddling them, and then our staff at our company, you've really helped us grow. And from all the employees of the company, thank you. And I think a big thank you too from all the consumers out there that own all your boats over the years. So we're looking forward to paddling your boats for many, many years to come. So I've enjoyed the friendship, and thanks so much for everything you've done.
Well, it's been good years.
And we'll have a bunch more.
Yeah, you always got a list of new boats you want.
All right. Cheers, folks.
And you just added one this weekend.
Nice. And there'll be another one next weekend.
I won't be here next weekend.
Well, thanks, DY.
Anyhow, it's been fun.
All right. Cheers.